Greetings to you all, and welcome to this wonderful attribute to demystify and celebrate the explorer's flag. I want to welcome all of you in every time zone that's available. So depending on that, whether it's good evening, good afternoon, or good morning. And we want to welcome you and put on your either hiking boots or strap on your flippers or put on your astronaut suit, because we're going to take you to other remote regions around the map. We have basically an hour to bring to you the history, introduce you to one of our flag awardees, Evan Kovacs, a world-class diver, passionate explorer, and underwater photographer, and meet two experts from our committee. First will be Dr. Mike Magnak, one of the world's leading experts on expedition and remote environmental medicine, focused on medical preparedness. And then we're going to work with Susan Eaton, who's a geoscientist, explorer, and journalist who will describe skill sets in preparing for team groups on expedition. She would probably know as founder of SEDNA, leading multiple teams of women divers in forbidding Arctic waters. And summarizing the inner workings of our committee and the flag application process will be our Flag and Honors Coordinator and Head of Grants, Emerald Nash. So let's move on and see exactly how many flags are in the field. If we can cue up the map. So there are roughly 222 flags in operation. This represents 25 to 30 that are currently out in the field now. And I believe we actually have Evan's flag marked on the map as well, so you can get an idea where he is. And then we wanted to show you what each flag really means. So we're going to highlight flag 161 of this 222 flags and show you basically how much history is in each one of them. 1955, this American Polar Basin expedition with John Stanwell Fletcher. And you can scroll pretty quickly through these. 1983, a Titanic expedition with Michael Harris. 1990, Mesa Verde Paleohydrological Survey with Ruth White. And the 2012 Deep Challenge with James Cameron and Don Walsh. So each one of these flags of the 222 represent so much history within each one that roughly collectively we have between 1,000 and 1,500 expeditions since this process was started in actually 1918. I'm going to switch to a presentation and show you how this all started. So the flag has its notoriety from what we call the 5 firsts. And the first was the 1909 North Pole expedition with Matthew Henson and Robert Peary. And then below that, the South Pole in 1911 with Ronald Amundsen and his team. And then we move on to Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay in 1953 in their ascent of Everest. And then on to the deepest of Marianas Trench with Jacques Piccard and Don Walsh. And yes, of course, to the moon with Apollo 11, Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong, and Michael Collins. You can see some of these historical illustrations in our records. This is ornithologist James Chapin. And one of the original flags, which was the inception for the current flag, which was designed by Frederick Dellenbaugh, one of the club's founding members. So you can see how they've illustrated between what we call the red of courage, the blue of fidelity, lies a broad white diagonal displaying the initials of the club's name and a compass rose, symbolizing the worldwide circle of the club's interests. And the first members to carry this new flag were Clyde Fisher and Carventh Wells, who journeyed to Lapland in 1924 while leading an astronomy expedition for the American Museum of Natural History. This was a celebration event from 1925 at the club. And again, you'll get some of these interesting expeditions that are illustrated here. When I was given these, and we want to thank Lacey Flint from the Explorers Club, who's our archivist, who graciously sent some of these records to me earlier today. But interestingly enough, I was looking at this Karakami Pass expedition in the Chinese Turkestan region, and there was no name attached, but so I cross-referenced it back with Google and found that it was Theodore and Kermit Roosevelt that led this expedition. And then this is a wonderful photograph, the Barbizon Plaza Hotel after the Antarctica expedition. You can see all the notoriety here. And interestingly enough, even with Amelia Earhart, that we just inaugurated as a posthumous member with the Women's Initiative, since at the time she was not able to be a member, but the club has posthumously honored her recently with Anne Lindbergh. So we're pleased to present some of these archival photographs to show you the kind of history that this flag has gone through. Roy Chapman, sorry for the spelling mistake there, Andrews, Central Asiatic Expeditions. And the Lewis Kotlow, Second Antarctic Expedition. If you come to the club, at the Explorers Club, in the Clark Room, which is pictured in the upper left, you'll see a whole series of these flags which have since been retired. Many of these that I've noted, especially with the 5 firsts, Tor Heyerdahl's flag is up there, and you'll see some of the initial inceptions of the flag history, so you get an idea of how it evolved into its current place. These are some of the more current expeditions that have been going on for the last few years, and thought we would just illustrate some of these people so you get an idea of the variety and the scope of where they go, both to the highest reaches of space and the lowest reaches of the ocean. Here's Frederick Paulson and his 2007 Arctic Drift expedition. His Honor, His Royal Highness, Prince Albert, with our former president, Richard Wiesa, on the right. And some of the women of note, which I love this one with Anne Dubélé with the Huli Wigmen of Papua New Guinea. Only at the Explorers Club, by the way, can you get titles like this. I don't know how many of you people would even know about the Huli Wigmen of Papua New Guinea, but these would be the kinds of conversations that would happen at the Explorers Club dinner. Over to our right there is Kathy Sullivan, the first woman to walk in space. And here she is heading to the deepest ocean floor. And of course, many organizations have their highness, but we have your deepness, Sylvia Earle, who's the pioneer and founder of Mission Blue, as well as being so well known for all her efforts around the world with regard to ocean conservation and just the place where she calls home. This is, we show you that we have no limits on the age of our participants. So if you're a young explorer, you should get inspired by this North Pole expedition that was done by Richard Garriott, Martin Krause, Gallia's on the right there, and all their children joined in on this. So we wanted to show you this to inspire those of you who might be watching or have kids that are younger, who have that burning passion, because that's really what links all of us. It fuels our energy, our intellect, and most of all, our curiosity to figure out all the areas on this planet that people have or have not been to explore them deeper, to ask questions, and explore our own sense of this wonderful planet that we live on. Naturally, we also have space-made flags. These were some of the ones brought back from Apollo 11. So we have our own iteration of the Explorer's flag that could be taken up to space, has been on numerous space missions. These are some of the more retired ones. And this was one that I got to be present for. This is for the Inspiration 4 group. It was a flag return. And I just wanted to describe one person in this picture. I mean, I would preview by telling you that for every photograph that is shown here tonight, there are literally 500 that I had to omit. They're not done by notoriety or selection. It was more by availability. So there's no prejudicial sense of what is regarded as true exploration here. But it's difficult to capture all of what the accomplishments of many members of this Explorers Club have. But I was struck in this group with Haley here, who's third to the left. When Haley was 10 years old, one of her knees began to ache and her doctor thought it was just a sprain, but a few months later, tests revealed that Haley suffered from osteosarcoma, a type of bone cancer, and her family turned to St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital for her treatment and her care, which included chemotherapy and a limb-saving surgery. She is now finished with treatment and thriving. She obtained an undergraduate degree in Spanish in 2014 and obtained her physician's assistant's degree in 2016. She now works at St. Jude's, the very place that saved her life, as a PA with leukemia and lymphoma patients. But it almost makes me teary-eyed to tell you the story, because here you have someone with probably the most dramatic disability who has become an astronaut. And only in a place like the Explorers Club do we celebrate people like this. And like I say, for every one person like this, there's 500 others that I'm missing. And as our last slide for my part of the presentation here anyway, I wanted to show you the 5 Deeps expedition that was led by Victor Vescovo, here matched with Richard Garriott on your left, Victor on the right, and at the bottom you can see them holding a flag. And for those of you who have read and seen the news reports on just about every news channel and paper on the planet, with the recent discovery of Shackleton's Endurance, we have Menson Bound on my, he's on my right. I'm completely over on the right side, and also John Shears, the expedition leader, and then Richard Garriott. I just wanted to play you this because I was able to present this flag to them at GLEX, an International Exploration Forum this past summer. Let me see, here we go. Across there. So we launched this expedition off back in July of last year, and what a wonderful news report to hear that they indeed found the Endurance, and we'll get more news from them at later dates. I'm sure every news agency is hounding them at this point. But I wanted to introduce our next speaker, Evan Kovacs. As I mentioned, he's an esteemed and passionate explorer, world-class diver, underwater photographer, has done explorations of the RMS Titanic and her sister ship, the HMHS Britannic. Over the course of his career, he has participated and led expeditions to survey and film wrecks, caves, and archaeological sites around the United States, to the islands of the South Pacific, English Channel, jungles of Mexico, and the Dominican Republic. The list goes on, by the way, all the way around the globe. His underwater and topside work can be seen on National Geographic, the History Channel, PBS, Nova, CBC, NHK, and again, the list goes on. But with no further ado, I would love to introduce Evan, and I'm looking forward to the talk myself.
Well, I mean, thank you very much. It's a really kind and generous introduction there. I feel extremely fortunate to have just been able to take part in so many wonderful expeditions around around the world. But the ones that have become some of my most passionate projects, many of them actually related back to the Explorers Club, and they were flagged expeditions. And in the beginning, I really didn't know what that was about. I'm like, I'd heard of the Explorers Club, and I heard there was a polar bear there. It sounded pretty cool, but we went out, and I remember looking with envy these people taking this flag out, and 2 or 3 would go over and get pictures with it, and I was sort of intrigued and excited. And over the years, I've been fortunate enough to be a part of, I don't know, 7 or 8 different expeditions that were all underwater, but that ran the gamut from Titanic to the Apollo 11 engine recoveries with the Bezos family and stuff like that. But I think one of my proudest moments in my exploration career was when I actually was able to apply for and carry my own flag for our expedition this past year to Britannic. And if you actually, if you want to show some of the photos, but one of the most exciting parts about it was as we were getting our team to go to Britannic, which again is the sister ship to Titanic, at the airport in Greece, we bumped into John Stella, who happened to be carrying a flag for another expedition in Greece. And so we figured it was a good and auspicious beginning to have two flags collide internationally at the airport. And so we started off with this. The Britannic is an amazing dive, and it's a very it's an emotional dive for a lot of us because one of the first flagged expeditions that I was on and an integral part of, we had the expedition leader passed away, and he the flag was retired after that. And for over a decade, I've been trying to get permits to go back and finish the job that we had intended to start in 2009. And it was only now in 2021, after COVID delays and everything, that we were able to get out there with the both with the flag and with an Explorers Club Discovery grant to go out and finish the mission. And I'm extremely happy to say that we had to date our most successful trip ever on Britannic. And if you can go to the next slide, it was a rebreather, a closed circuit expedition where for the first time, again, in over a decade, we were sanctioned and allowed and permitted because we had we were sort of partners with the Greek effort to go inside and explore parts of the shipwreck that people haven't seen in over 100 years, not just on Britannic, but we were sort of going to places that people hadn't even seen on Titanic. And so there's a lot of sort of interest in what's going on inside the wreck. And one of the very cool aspects of it too is that besides just the diving and sort of going underwater and doing that aspect of it, we were and are very interested in sort of the science that encompasses decompression and sort of all other aspects of it. So we brought in Divers Alert Network, who's also a great partner in this, and they came and they were running they were doing EKGs, they were doing tests. We were wearing biomonitoring for both a month before, during, and after to sort of see some of the effects of decompression and long extended range diving. So typically what we do when we go underwater on projects like this, it is nothing like sort of your normal recreational project, and it's a very select group of people that you want to go and do this type of work with. And most of us, in fact, all of us, have been diving together in one way, shape, or form for 10 to 20 years. And on any expedition, that's exceptionally important, just to have that headspace that no matter who's there and what's going on, you've got the people there that will have your back and have your support, and vice versa. And we support that. It's a band of brothers and sisters, and we all are sort of brought together through this common this common philosophy of and passion for exploration and just sort of trying to see what's around the next corner. I mean, some people will say, "Oh, a shipwreck is just, well, what's there? Why bother?" All these types of questions. But in almost every shipwreck and whatnot, there's always a story. There's a human story to tell. And on this one of my favorite aspects that we were able to do was mentoring. And I think that is such an important part of any project and any expedition. We're all getting older, and it's always important to make sure that we're bringing in sort of the next generation. And in this case, we had a young woman. She's a very talented diver and scientist, and she was able to come over and offer up her time and learn a lot about sort of expedition and exploration diving. And so what you're looking at here is somebody taking a picture of her, but behind us, we would do a 45-minute dive to an hour dive down on the wreck and then spend anywhere from 4 to 6 hours in the water column. And in many ways, that is the most dangerous part of the dive. And to have somebody like Alex here and some of the other support personnel come down and just they do things like bring water, bring food, and just check in. And that check-in is a real sort of mental relief. Just to know that people are keeping an eye on you and really helping out. And that was one of the best parts for me. And this is, like any good project, the last photo is a little hazy, it's a little blurry, but it's the end of a very successful expedition. And like I said, we it was our first time ever. I think out of 10 days of diving, we had 8 days that were we got in the water and weren't blown out. And we got into spots that we never dreamed of, and we're just finishing up the report on that now. So that'll be coming to you soon, Emerald. It was really exciting and just a great pleasure to bring together folks from all over the world. And this is an international team, and it's still, it's still the sort of technical diving scene is still very male dominated. And it was really important to me anyway, to make sure that we were trying to get a lot of trying to get new blood in there. And we had some just fantastic people overall, and it wouldn't have been possible not only without the Explorers Club support, but everybody knows sort of what that flag is and what it's about and how it's sort of something to rally behind. And there wasn't a single person who wasn't excited to not just be there, but to be there and be a part of the flagged expedition, not the least of which was me. So.
That's great. Thank you so much, Evan. That was really inspiring, and you give more reason to why we're so happy when these flags go out to see the kind of work that's being done. Just one quick question, because we just had a couple of minutes now, but when you see teams like that being built, how do you effectuate this kind of thing? I mean, how do you make a team like this? Did you start just being curious and then attracting like-minded people? Or, how did this really evolve?
For so many of us, it really started as literally just that, a curiosity. You start putting more and more time. It's a passion, and then it turns into a little bit more and a little bit more, and people see that passion. Passion is contagious. People want to be around passionate people. When somebody's excited about something, you can't help but just want to go and do it. Sometimes you don't even know what it is. It's like, oh yeah, sure, I want to go climb I want to go sleep overnight on a rope 1,000 feet up. Yeah, it sounds great. But whoever's explaining it to you, if they've got that passion and that drive, you can't help it. You're gonna want to be there. And diving and exploring underwater is absolutely no different. I mean, it's so many of us will not be astronauts, but in many ways we can sort of touch the surface and sort of be the quintessential aquanauts. But and in my case, I mean, I wanted to be an astronaut too, and I won't be, but I got to partake in lots of little pieces of sort of history that go from outer space to underwater, and and everybody connects to that. I mean, we can't. So anyway, sorry, I got a little off topic, but
no, you're passionate. That's what passionate people do.
Well, yeah, I'll be all over the place, so I have to be reeled in.
But thank you for sharing that common thread that I think binds us all. And although you thought your introduction was illustrious, I can tell you that everyone on this call is pretty much illustrious, as well as the organization in general. Our next speaker is great to follow because I can see all the medical concerns even on your expedition work, Evan. But our next speaker is Dr. Michael Magnak, a renowned physician. He's an author. He's a urologist and corporate medical executive. He was Global Medical Affairs Executive Director for the GlaxoSmithKline franchise and is the Chief Medical Advisor for Crisis Response for multiple Fortune 500 companies, including Cognizant, and for the Washington, D.C. Board of Trade. So Michael maintains academic appointments as an adjunct professor of urology and engineering at the George Washington University and is a member of the Baylor College of Medicine National School of Tropical Medicine. He's a former chief medical officer for Triple Canopy Incorporated, a large international high-risk security firm. I think the common thread for you, Mike, is high risk. I think that's the thread that comes through with everything you do. And anyway, his latest book, Lizard Bites and Street Bites, Travel Emergencies and Your Health and Safety and Security, is the go-to book for travelers of any kind, whether you're on exploration or whether you're just a family going to a remote area. This would be the great book to take along. I certainly carry one wherever I go. So Mike, I'm going to give it over to you to let us know the medical concerns.
Well, thank you very much, Martin, for the kind introduction. And it's a pleasure to be here with all of you and these very accomplished speakers today. So I am going to, let's see if I can share this correctly. There we go. And okay, there we go. Now, this enthusiasm that Evan spoke of is absolutely correct, and it's contagious. And everybody gets excited about going on an expedition, and then you're putting all together all these pieces, and then at the last minute you say, well, God, wait a minute, we better think about safety. We better think about the medical aspects. Do we need shots? Do we need, what do we need? And that's what I'm here to talk about today. Very briefly, a very quick 30,000-foot view of some of the issues you need to think about. I'm the associate editor of the Explorer's Journal. You may have read my columns on expedition medicine that appear in every one of the issues. And there are many different topics to cover, as you can see, and they're very diverse. So I'm going to try to keep this to somewhat a very broad view and very quick. Now, what is expedition medicine? It's basically a subset of wilderness medicine, which is basically medical care where you don't have access to, first world care. So that includes a lot of things like venture racing, event medicine, scouting, search and rescue, and medical missions. But expedition medicine is a subset of that. It's where you have remote medical care while you're on a scientific or educational event. And it's been very properly described, I believe, as military medicine for the civilian. So you need a variety of talents and experience to bring to play in this type of a setting. Now, what are the common things that happen with every expedition? Well, if you're going on an expedition, these on the left side are highly important to pay attention to. Communication, transportation, the fact you're in a remote location, trauma, and whether you need to evacuate somebody, and the fact that you have limited supplies, and you may have other issues you wouldn't normally run into on some other kind of trip. Then there are the location-specific problems, and you can see that some of these are listed over here. So if you're going to the mountains compared to the ocean, compared to the Arctic, you all have a different subset of problems you have to deal with, in addition to the common ones that you see. So you need to really think through the issues that could apply. Now, there are other specialized areas where these become even more specialized. They really do. I sat on the NASA Aerospace Medicine Advisory Board for 3 years, and we looked after the health and welfare of our astronauts and their families during that time. And there are certain things that occur in space that you don't get here with microgravity and with a variety of other problems that are exacerbated. So, and if you look over here on the left, the tropical area is different than the marine area, and high altitude is different than the desert. So those are areas that you really need to consider when you're approaching how to address these things. Other things that are not often considered: nutrition. If you're going on a very exhausting expedition, you better take into account the amount of calories you're going to need. And that's a very serious thing, because you're stuck in the jungle somewhere. Don't count on hunting down, a nice big tapir to have roast pork that night. You're gonna really need to prepare for your nutrition. Foot care. How many times have we heard this before? Seriously, you must pay attention to the stuff you wear on your feet and the fact that they're broken in properly. One that's near and dear to Martin's heart: they're dental emergencies. If you have ever seen anybody with an abscess of the tooth, you will be absolutely impressed, because they're not going to die, but they sure want to die. It's extremely painful. And so you need to think about that in advance. So you have a dental exam within 6 months of the time you leave, so you don't run into these problems. Ophthalmic injuries are there, psychological problems. Do you know how many people? There are a significant number of people that don't say that they drink every night, but they do. And then you're out on the ocean where you can't get resupplied with alcohol, and they all of a sudden go into withdrawal. And that is a common problem. And my colleagues that are involved on the ocean have talked about that before. And we're becoming more, people are traveling that have a wider variety of problems, such as immunosuppression, but also children, the elderly, and ladies who are pregnant may also be traveling. And there are subsets of problems with that. Now, Martin kindly mentioned my book, Lizard Bites and Street Riots. I have two other authors on here, are very accomplished. One is the Surgeon General of the US Coast Guard, and the other is the former Director of Security for the IMF, where they had 600,000 people, 600 people traveling daily throughout the world. This book has won awards, and I'm proud of that. But I think you would find this very useful when you're traveling. It has a wide variety of information on what to do in a certain situation and how to diagnose it. So back to the enthusiasm part. So we're all excited. We're going on this expedition, you know? So the explorers are all pumped up and the people are going all excited. So what does the explorer see in this situation? Well, this is an expedition. It's a chance for great adventure. It's certainly going to be somewhat challenging, if not significantly challenging. And then there's the hope that you're going to be bringing back scientific knowledge. But if you're the medical officer and the physician who is in charge, or medical officer in general on the trip, what does the doctor see? Well, here we're looking at possible trauma. We're looking at hypothermia. We may need to rescue people, and we may need to evacuate people. So we have to plan for that for your expedition, and generally our expedition, because we're part of a team. So why is another thing that I harp on all the time is to have the proper medical evacuation insurance. And the reason is that up to 2/3 of people that travel, of the 50 million annual travelers, self-report health problems. These are generally self-limiting, but up to 8%, that means 4 million people become ill enough to seek medical care abroad or upon return. Very interesting, much more widespread. As far as the need for evacuation and possibility of death, well, you have a smaller percentage clearly that need evacuation, but it's still a number that's between 5,000 and 50,000 people a year. So this is a real issue. You need to prepare for that, have the right insurance. That's a topic for a whole nother discussion, and I'm not going to go into it any deeper right now, but I'm happy to discuss that with anybody. So, you know, you also find out that there are about 1 in 100,000 people that travel will die when they're traveling. The major cause far and away is motor vehicle accidents, and drowning is second, but motor vehicle accidents is far and away the highest. Now, this varies with age and gender. Females are less likely to die. Well, why is that? Because they're probably not the ones doing the naked headstand on a moving motorcycle, you know? So guys are maybe take some risks they shouldn't, and females are a little less likely to do that. And I think that's borne out by these statistics. Surprisingly, infectious disease is a low cause of death on disease, and those older people you think are going back to the old country to die, well, there's actually a lower rate of both cardiovascular disease and cancer than in the general population on these trips. So these are kind of myths that we can dispel. Now, here's the expeditions that I've been on. I've been on others too, but these are kind of the key ones. You know, Central African Jungle with the National Geographic Explorer series, the Titanic Salvage Expedition, where I carried the flag for that because we did scientific experiments in the deep water there. Antarctica, diving the treasure galleon in Florida, the famous Senora Nweeia de Atocha, deepest canyon in the world. Been in Mongolia a couple of times. So a spectacular expedition to look at early human footprints and evaluating the new species found in the Gobi Desert, the wild camel, which is a third species of camel. So each of these have different sets of problems. I'm just going to share a few photos from those to give you something to think about. So in Central Africa, first of all, we landed the day after a coup. So the capital was seething, and fortunately, the World Wildlife Fund was there to whisk us away from the airport and get us down to our small plane that we flew down deep into the jungle, just like a Tarzan movie, flying low over the tops of the treetops. Down there were animals all over the place, and I'm telling you, you have to pay attention because they could be right there and you won't see them, like this forest elephant that was about 10 feet away from us. The pygmies were fantastic, making their arrows with poison attached to them, and we went hunting with them. And they also taught me where to find water in the jungle in these vines here. Then back in your cabana, you had some unwelcome visitors there. that were large. These things are huge spiders, the huntsman spiders. And when I asked the Bantu ranger if he would kill them, he said, well, they're known as range spiders. And if you kill one, just another one will come in. So, okay, I guess we will leave them where they are so I know where they are. Anyway, challenging things out there in the middle of the jungle, very hot, very humid. Contrast that with going to Antarctica, where we took 100 kids down to do scientific experiments with the Students in Ice program, which is a great program. And you can see the majesty of the glaciers there. And you understand automatically that there are different medical problems such as cold and hypothermia and isolation, certainly, but some other issues you have there. That was a fantastic trip. Contrast that, then going back to Africa, but in the drier parts of Africa. This is in northern Tanzania, where a brand new discovery of early human footprints occurred. And we were the first scientists to evaluate them. There were 24 footprints present in the volcanic ash here. We uncovered another 37. It is now a World Heritage Site with over 500 footprints there, including kids moving around and all kinds of stuff. And they weren't tiny either. That's my footprint. That was one of the men's footprints there. He had a stride 6 inches longer than mine. I'm 6 feet tall, and his foot was probably about a size 14 compared to my 10. So a lot of things in this, but think about the problems. You got heat, you got exposure, you got infectious diseases, you got the fact that you're in a remote location. So another similar expedition was with the Smithsonian Human Origins program I'm very close with, and I was fortunate enough to go work with them in their million-year-old human artifacts at their site in Kenya. But again, similar problems there of heat and dryness and remote areas. Fantastic trip. Now contrast that with going to Mongolia for the first scientific dive in Mongolia. Well, I'm sure you're saying to yourself, how can you do a dive in Mongolia? It's a landlocked country. Well, they have large lakes on the border of Siberia with them, one of which is called Lake Hovskal, and it has 1% to 2% of the world's fresh water. So what it looks like, me having grown up in Michigan, I'm very aware of what the Great Lakes look like, and that's what it looked like. It's of that kind of magnitude of the lake. But it's at 5,000 feet. It got thermal plains. It's very cold in the deeper thermal plains. You've got a very remote area, so the transportation is very difficult. And the Russians had been there for 30 or 40 years, but now we're gone. But they left some artifacts behind us, including these ships that were left behind. But the Mongolians don't eat fish. They don't fish. And there was fish species in there I'd never seen humans. So it was a pretty amazing diving experience to go in there and have these fish come up to you and not be afraid at all. Very interesting place, but you got to think, the altitude makes you have to recalculate your dive tables. It's not the same. So again, interesting problems. We had to be aware of decompression. Here we are at the deepest canyon in the world in Peru, which is deeper than the Grand Canyon. It's the Kolob Canyon. You may know some of the Polish explorers that were the first ones to publicize this. And I went back with them as their medical officer for a return trip. And here you can see how rough this was. And in fact, we were worried about people falling. In fact, had somebody fell about 50 or 60 feet, was stopped by a patch of cactus. So he had about 1,000 cactus spines in him, in addition to some significant injuries. We had to evacuate him. And this is the only flat space in the entire trip was over here, and that was our campsite. That's the view from walking down this trail to the campsite. So you can see how steep and remote this is. Fortunately, he did fine, and he's been forever thankful for that. Now, lastly, I'm going to come to this expedition back to see the wild camels in Mongolia. And I bring it because this is a whole different set of problems. Mongolia in August has very wide range of thermal extremes. It goes from 80 degrees in the day to about 30 at night. So you roast in the day and you freeze at night, and it is pretty striking. But the other thing is, so you go through the mountain passes and you've got snow. And then, it's a desert, right? So Gobi Desert, it's not supposed to rain. Well, it rained biblically for 3 days there, horizontal rain, such that it washed out the roads, and we were really afraid about getting back. So you never know what you're going to face in some of these places. And here's the wild camel species there, and you can see it's quite different than the Bactrian camel that we rode down into those areas. But a whole different set of problems, as you can see. And I'm going to leave you with a quote that's one of my favorites. A friend of mine said this to me, and I loved it. And for all the expedition, the excitement we have, we want to explore, we go out and explore. And, we remember that this is finite because you can only live so long. But you may not be able to make life longer, but you can certainly make it wider. And that's what we do as explorers. So with that, I'll end my presentation with my picture from the Titanic when I was a medical director on that salvage expedition. And it's the end of my talk tonight, but I'm sure it's the beginning of thought process for all of you on what you need to think about for medical problems. I'm happy to talk to anybody about this in the future, and I thank you for your attention tonight.
Mike, thank you so much. I was pleased to see the footprint area in Tanzania, that your footprint is there. So in another 1,000 years, we can discover Manyak Man. I want him to be remembered. But I think your talk has been very illustrative of basically how many resources we have in the club. To have this kind of a medical resource as an advice or as a place to go, I remember even during one of our expeditions to the Arctic, we consulted you about COVID because we were concerned about evacuation plans when a lot of companies weren't willing to agree to do it. So these are important issues. And certainly we can all find ourselves, a way into trouble, but we can't always find our way back out. So thank you for providing some of those pathways. Our next speaker I want to introduce, who's just as illustrious as the others, is Susan Eaton, President, CR of Eco Consultants. She's the founder and leader for Sedna Epic Expeditions. Sedna is the goddess of the ocean, and good for her to become the leader of those goddesses that she takes on these winter expeditions to go snorkeling in the snorkel zone, as she calls it. In 2015, the Royal Canadian Geographic Society named Susan one of Canada's top 100 modern-day explorers and trailblazers. And a year later, the same organization named her as Canada's 25 greatest female explorers. Susan is the founder and the leader of the multi-year Sedna Epic Expedition, which we talked about, which is comprised of an international team of women, ocean explorers, scientists, historians, artists, image makers, educators, and scuba divers. She founded this in 2013, and the Sedna Expedition's mission is to scout and document and record disappearing sea ice in the Arctic. Susan has come face to face with the charging 1,400-pound leopard seals in the Southern Ocean, so close, in fact, that she could count the freckles. So we all have our own encounters, and I want to have Susan talk to us a little bit about her team and kind of the preparation and equipment and resources that she needs to conduct her work.
Thank you very much, Martin, for that lovely introduction. Yes, if you were bitten by a 1,400-pound leopard seal, definitely need immediate medical attention. They're deadly critters, one of the two apex predators in Antarctica, the other being orcas. I'm just going to share my screen and pop up my presentation. Okay. All right, just share. All right, we have the same problem I had earlier that I need to go back. So I'm wondering what I should do here. I'll unshare my screen if I can. I want to start at slide 1. So I just need to.
Yeah, Susan, if you just want to unshare your screen for a second.
I'm just trying to, I think I've unshared. Yeah, I've left there. Okay, just give me 1 second, please. And I'll try to find this presentation. I just want to get it to start at slide 1. And, but it looks like I'm still sharing screen, am I not?
You're not sharing screen at the moment, no. So you can
okay,
as you need
but
to.
I am, as far as I'm concerned, what I can see. So I'm having a problem here in terms of getting my PowerPoint up and functioning.
So Susan, you can just hit back arrow and flip all the way back through all your slides, or I can share for you if you prefer.
No, I'm good. I think I'm right where I need to be. Okay, excellent. Thank you. It always happens. It always happens. It's wonderful to be here this evening to speak with everyone about expeditions. Since 2010, I've been on 8 epic expeditions from Antarctica to the Arctic. 2 of them were flagged expeditions. I was an earth scientist, journalist, and polar snorkeler on 2 of those expeditions, the flagged expeditions, which I'll talk about in a second. And I've led 4 of those expeditions. And as Martin said, I'm the founder and leader of the Sedna Epic Expedition. And on our 10th anniversary, we've actually renamed ourselves to reflect our growing circumpolar focus in terms of exploring a wider range of the Arctic. And now we're Sea Women Expeditions, which I'll get into later. But I'm going to discuss how you can craft a winning application for an Explorers Club flag. And, you know, exploration and discovery in the 21st century is, we have technology, we have GPS, we've got everything at our fingertips. And yet, in many cases, 100 years ago and today, raising money for expeditions is still one of the biggest challenges that explorers face, especially going to remote parts of the planet and polar regions. I'll get into some of the learnings that I've had, you know, being involved in these polar expeditions, being involved in one of the biggest search and rescue operations ever in the Canadian Arctic, where 31 people were rescued from a floating ice island that broke away from land, and we floated 19 kilometers towards the open Northwest Passage on the northern tip of Baffin Island. Things can go wrong. And, you know, anticipating what might go wrong and having a medical expert in the team is always extremely important because I've lived it and I've seen it. And, you know, it's always about planning. So in 2012, I traveled to the Western Antarctic Peninsula with Robert Swan and his Expedition 2041. This is a photograph of the expedition team of 70 explorers from around the world, from developing and developed nations. About 30% of the team was women. And we had people from multiple walks of life, from industry, from academia, from NGOs, writers, journalists, divers, snorkelers, and renewable energy experts, because we were there to talk about climate change and come up with solutions. So it was called Team Inspire. And 2041 is the year that the protocol, the Montreal Protocol, expires to protect Antarctica, because currently it's protected against all types of development, and it's a continent for science and peace at this moment. But we're going to talk about the Explorers Club and how to apply for a flag. So when you're looking to apply for a flag, the first thing to consider is that the Explorers Club is interested in science, new ways of doing science, scientific discovery, exploration, and so on. And we're not too keen on personal adventurers or treasure hunters unless there's a really great underpinning of science with the treasure hunter in particular. But so explorers, scientists, and we tend to shy away from personal adventure unless there's a scientific component to it. So that's one of the things we're looking for when you're applying for a flag. The expedition needs to have a goal that will advance human knowledge. And it could be scientific, it could be anthropological, it could be cultural, it could be any number of things. But in order to get a flag, we're looking for something that is significant in terms of advancing human knowledge. And maybe it's a problem that other people have looked at before, but they're looking at it with a different tool, a different scientific tool or technology, or a different focus or a different paradigm. So we're looking for something that will advance human knowledge in terms of awarding flags. And the team members, including the expedition leader, needs to be able to communicate to the Flag and Honors Committee what the expedition purpose is, what the results are that you expect to achieve, including your successes. And then when it's all said and done, we expect that your results will not only take the form of an expedition report, which is housed at the club, but we hope that academic papers, print articles in popular magazines or newspapers, books, photographs, films, educational media materials, and then new media materials, which could be, you know, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and so on, are going to be showcasing the knowledge that you've gained to the general public, from K to 12 kids to the general public, and as well as peers and scientific partners and so on. So those are some of the key things that we're looking for when you think about putting together an expedition. Now, planning for success. Michael touched on this as well as Evan. And when you're planning for success, you need to select the right mix of people in the expedition. It's extremely important as the expedition leader to do so, because you want a mixture of people. You want diversity in the teams. And as Evan said very, very aptly or very correctly, we want to mentor young explorers. So the teams that I lead are from ages late teens to late 70s. We want people of all ages and backgrounds to come together to solve a problem and or to discover something in nature. So we're looking for expertise. We're in your team makeup. We're looking for mission specialists. And if you're diving in the Britannic or you're diving on the Titanic, the mission specialists might be ROV experts, they might be rebreather divers, they might be drone pilots, they might be surveyors. So we're looking for the mission specialists who can assist with determining how to frame the question and how to attack it, if you will. They could be, or scientists, they could be biologists. We're looking for on-the-ground experience. So if you and your team members have never been to this place before that you want to explore, it's a great idea to do a reconnaissance trip, potentially, to meet with locals on the ground, to meet with government officials, Indigenous people who live in the areas, if you're working in an area where there's Indigenous people, to gain the on-the-ground experience in that particular area, or in the region, maybe it's the Arctic or Antarctica. People skills are extremely important, because on boats, in remote areas, on boats, and in teams, interpersonal skills are extremely important. So we're looking for team members who are great with people. We're looking for people's temperaments. Are they leaders or are they followers? And it's great to be a follower too. In the teams that I lead, we have multiple leaders and experts in science, experts in the arts, experts in ROVs and so on. So they lead various portions of the expedition. So in many cases, you have multiple experts who are leaders in their own skill set. Communicators. Now, communicators are important because not only is communication an important part of the expedition mandate to communicate to the world what you found, but communications, again, within the team, which goes back to people skills. And finally, from my perspective, educators, because we want to educate the general public about what we've discovered. We want to excite them. We want to create enthusiasm about STEM and STEAM expeditions, and we want to reach the next generation of explorers. We need to understand, evaluate, and mitigate risk factors that are critical to the expedition success. And in my opinion, training, and in some cases extensive training, is required for the success of many missions if they're especially tough. Mountaineering expeditions, expeditions in jungles, and expeditions that involve scuba diving, snorkeling in polar regions, like the ones I lead. Now, this is a photograph here that I took of a Zodiac with scuba divers in it. And they're sitting out in front of the Petermann Island in Antarctica, which is at 65 degrees 10 minutes south and 64 degrees 10 minutes west. Now, this is the glacier that's coming off, the ice sheet that's coming off the island. And it's very dangerous to be close to an ice front like this. Now, they're not as close as they would appear in the photograph, but we stayed a little bit further back because our guide, our Zodiac driver, was less experienced than the Zodiac driver that was driving that Zodiac. And we were traveling on an expedition with Explorers Club Flag 108. It was the Elysium Visual Epic Expedition led by Michael with Ocean Geographic, and we were studying ocean change in Antarctica. We were supported by Waterproof Expeditions and also by Waterproof International, who are in that Zodiac with some of the team members, and they are the leading company, one of the leading companies of Antarctic exploration scuba diving in the world. And in fact, they pioneered diving in polar regions. So we had the right team with the right people And the decision was made in this particular case that they could approach the front face of the Tidewater Glacier here. But if you don't know the area, it would not be a good idea, for example, to do something like this. So mitigating risk factors is extremely important. And that means understanding them, evaluating them, relying on local advice, which is always important, including when we work in the Arctic, indigenous knowledge is extremely important to the success of any expedition. You know, when I went to Antarctica for the first time in 2010 with Elysium, the Flag 108 expedition, you know, the whole story about Shackleton was so riveting, and we were following in Shackleton's footsteps from Antarctica, South Georgia. We landed on Elephant Island, which was really quite amazing. And I love this ad that, you know, the myth has grown. It's not really based on fact anymore. We do know that this was fabricated by one of his relatives, but the ad itself is quite exciting. Men want it for hazardous journey, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return doubtful, honor and recognition in case of success. Ernest Shackleton. Now, this story goes that he put the ad in a newspaper in England, and 27 men applied to go to Antarctica, and they went on this famous journey, the Imperial Transantarctic Expedition, which, as we know, ended with the Endurance sinking and a huge survival story that ensued. I've never been one to let a good story, fact, get in the way of a good story. So when I started my expeditions to the Arctic, and mine are women-based, by the way, I actually plagiarized this ad, and I said women want it for hazardous journeys, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete sunlight, because we were going to be exploring the Arctic during the summer months, constant danger, safe return hopeful, he had said doubtful, honor and recognition in case of success. And the Huffington Post picked up this ad, and I had hundreds of women contacting me for 14 spaces on an expedition. It was overwhelming in terms of reaching out to women, one of the groups in terms of diversity that is underrepresented in many expeditions, and seeing the amazing response from women who are interested to explore the planet in a very aggressive way in terms of scuba diving and snorkeling, in a very unconventional way in many cases for some women. But it's been really quite amazing because we continue, and we're just getting ready for our 5th expedition since 2013. I'll get into that later. So, crafting a successful flag expedition. How do you plan for success? You need to understand and communicate the requirements for the expedition success. We want to hear you articulate this information in the flag application. Have you done a reconnaissance of the area? Were you there 25 years ago and something piqued your interest, you want to go back? In the Arctic or Antarctica, maybe you haven't been there. But if you haven't been there, then you need to tell us how you can actually achieve the goals of your expedition. Maybe your team is seasoned in Antarctic exploration or polar exploration in the Arctic. But have you done a reconnaissance? What do you know about the place? Are you familiar with previous expeditions that have traveled to this place? And if so, what happened during these previous expeditions? What were the results? What were the challenges? How are you going to do things differently? Are you investigating the same idea, the same question, or are you looking at something completely different? So we want to know what it is that you're doing and that you understand the history of exploration in the area. Perhaps you're bringing a brand new technology to an old problem that has not yet been solved. And that's fine too, but we need to understand your depth of knowledge in the area that you're going to explore. This is a photograph of me in the pink suit and one of my team members at 70 degrees north latitude in Norway in 2019, exploring the deep fjords in Norway during the winter herring run, and conducting ocean research and snorkeling with orcas during the herring run. But there's a lot of considerations here. It's pretty far north. The water's very cold. Hypothermia is an issue for snorkelers and divers. many things come into play, but one of the biggest issues too is your expedition budget reasonable? Have you come up with a budget for your expedition? And the further afield you're traveling, the more expensive it's going to be. And if you have a budget for your expedition, have you got funding in place? How are you funding your expedition? Are you applying for grants? Are you applying for bursary scholarships or individual team members funding? Do you have corporate partners? We'd like to know, what your funding looks like and if there's a good chance that your expedition is going to happen. And if you carried a flag in the past, we'd like to know that too. What were the results of the expeditions? And perhaps you didn't carry the flag, but you were, as I was, a member of the science team in 2 polar expeditions with Ocean Geographic, who carried 2 different flags in the past 10 years. So all of these things are important for us to know when you're completing the application forms. Permits, they're also important. If you're collecting specimens or conducting research, you need to check in with national, provincial, territorial, local authorities, residents, and Indigenous peoples in the area. If you are doing scientific research, need to understand if you need permits, and if so, obtain them as well, because they will hold up your expedition.
Susan, this is great. We're going to transfer to Emerald next. Just due to time, we want to stay on schedule here. So
fair enough.
I want to thank you very much. And I thought you mentioned 2 interesting things. One about education. It makes me think of the parallel group with Polar Trek at the National Science Foundation. And certainly with Ernest Shackleton, his ability to summarize a character within 2 minutes of meeting them. He had a remarkable sense. So thank you for bringing that to life. I wanted to introduce our next speaker, who's Emerald Nash, who is no less illustrious, by the way. And though we have been talking about people who have been exploring jungles, keep in mind Emerald works in New York City, equally a jungle of a different type. And although Susan has feared off a 1,400-pound leopard seal, I'm sure Emerald has dealt with many a charging member who has asked a question that she is either unable or not prepared to answer. She's our go-to person. She's our coordinator for Flag and Honors. It's been a privilege and honor to work with her. And now she's the director of grants, which helps us get a nice lineage between the grant process and also the flag process. Emerald will talk a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of the application process. And again, Emerald, I leave it to your good hands.
Thank you so much, Martin, for that kind intro. And I also want to thank Mike and Susan and Evan for joining us tonight. It's been so wonderful to hear your stories and your good advice. So it really is a pleasure to be here with you, albeit virtually. So I'm just going to quickly share my screen because I too have a little presentation, excuse me, to take you through. And here we go. So now that you've heard all this amazing stuff about the flags and what they mean, the symbolism, I'm sure you're probably wondering, how do I get in on this? And I'm here to tell you. So, we always say that carrying the Explorers Club flag is an honor and a privilege. Not every Explorers Club member will have the opportunity to carry the flag. Every flag has history, and with each year, those histories get longer. The flag is a symbol of our mission and everything the club embodies. So to be awarded a flag is much like getting the Good Housekeeping seal of approval in Explorers Club world. So without further ado, Susan covered a lot of this. So I'm going to go through fairly quickly the bullet points that you want to keep in mind before you submit a flag application. In order to receive a flag, you must be an Explorers Club member, and you have to be an Explorers Club member in good standing. So that's important. That means your dues have to be paid up, no issues, and so on and so forth. Again, as Susan mentioned, have a research goal that will advance human knowledge. So you don't necessarily need to be, conducting rocket science, but you do have to have some sort of goal that is going to contribute to human knowledge. You need to understand and communicate the requirements. We went over that. You need to have the right people on your team. If you are doing, excuse me, if you are doing an expedition to study rare plants and you don't have anyone experienced in botany on your team, that's a problem. And that's something that our committee is going to look for. Understanding risk factors, I think we've covered that, super important. Outline a realistic and well-planned budget. That is something that our committee will look at. Can you pay for this? How much are you allocating for various things? Does it seem realistic? That is all going to be looked at. Something that you must not do is conduct your research solely for commercial purposes. That's definitely not what we're looking for in an Explorers Club flag expedition. And you must not be delinquent in returning your flag or submitting your report from a previous flag expedition. That will immediately disqualify you. And then an additional note for conservation-related expeditions, we get so many conservation-related applications, which is fantastic because it means people are doing incredible work in important ways. But we did have to sort of add this caveat that if you're asking to carry the flag on a conservation-related expedition, we need to make sure that you are pursuing a novel or new solution to a conservation challenge, just because there are so many of them, and Explorers Club flags are for groundbreaking things for the most part. Another thing that we will require flag carriers to commit to is adhering to the Explorers Club Code of Ethics. Again, Susan touched on this a bit, so I'm not going to get super deep, but I think these are really important, and they are included in the application. So when you go in to fill out your application, you have to check a box that says you agree to this. You agree to attempting to acquire new information. We're not looking for treasure hunters necessarily or adventurers. We're looking for someone who is going to go out there, acquire the info, and share it with the world. Respecting the environment and the local culture of the utmost importance. Respect all local national laws. We talked about that. Give full credit to others. This one's also very important. Being aware of prior work and reference it appropriately. All of us stand on the shoulders of our predecessors. So what this means is the committee is really going to look at your application to see if you've done your homework. Do you know what has been done in this area? Do you know who's done that research? What were their results? What were their challenges? All of that's important information. And then again, planning your expeditions to avoid unnecessary risks. There is a famous quote by Roald Amundsen, which is, adventure is bad planning, I think is how it goes, paraphrasing. But essentially that sentiment is kind of what we're getting at here. I don't know how many out there subscribe to that. You can put it in the chat if you want, start a discussion. But essentially for an Explorers Club flag, we are looking for risk mitigation. We don't want you to go out there and take unnecessary risks. I think we've driven that home. We can move on. Now, nuts and bolts, how to apply. All Explorers Club members in good standing are welcome to submit an application via our online application system. Here's the URL. It's very simple, flagandhonors.explorers.org, and that is on our website. We can put it in the chat, but this is where you're going to go to submit your application. Gone are the days of paper application. Gone are the days of Word documents. We are working in the 21st century. So it does require you to go to this website, create a username, create a password, log in, and submit your application that way. Something you might want to do before you go through all that is prepare by gathering your information ahead of time. We're going to want information about the location of your research, your overall objective, your budget, and your team members. So it could be helpful for you to take some time, sit down, outline that beforehand, before you get online and start plugging away. Submitting your application 60 days prior to your expedition departure date is recommended. We review applications on a rolling basis, so there's no technical deadline, but our committee members are very dedicated volunteers, and they're often running expeditions of their own. So they're in the field a lot, And it's important to give enough lead time so that our committee members can weigh in and so the applications can be properly and thoroughly reviewed. If we understand exploration by nature is unpredictable, so if you can't get your application in 60 days in advance, that's okay. You can try anyway, and our committee members are committed to trying to turn emergency applications around as quickly as possible. It's doable, but we do recommend giving as much notice as possible. And then once you've done this, once you've logged in, you filled out all the information, you've added any additional information that you want to include, you can submit, and then you'll await word from our Flag and Honors Committee. We will notify you by email as to your success, or maybe not your success, but we'll let you know. So here's just a very quick screenshot of what our online system looks like. Once you go to the website, again, flagandhonors.explorers.org, you will see this welcome screen. It will give you the option to choose two programs, the Explorers Club Flag and award nominations. Obviously, in this case, you're going to choose Explorers Club Flag. You can, if you're a member of the club, nominate for awards when the time comes. But for now, we're looking at flags, obviously. So this is just a snapshot of the interface of our online application system. It takes you through, it walks you through. You have several tasks, one being the main application form, which is where you're going to put your personal contact details, all the information about your team members, that sort of thing. You also have an option here in the second task to upload CV, supporting documents, maps, anything that you think might support your application can go there. And then there's also an option to upload an image portfolio. And then the payment, which is required. We do require a $250 deposit for a flag application. And the reason for this is if a flag comes back damaged, or heaven forbid, if a flag doesn't come back at all, we'll at least be able to replace or repair it. Not that you can replace one of our priceless artifacts. And these flags are priceless artifacts. I would like to reiterate that. They have been around for a long time, most of them, and they have incredible histories attached to them. So we want to hang on to them. So then this is just a quick snapshot of, sort of what the form looks like, very standard online form. You'll be asked questions such as this: state your role in this project and your qualifications. What is your goal for this expedition in 3 sentences or fewer? I don't know about Mike and Susan and Martin, all committee members, but I would imagine 3 sentences or fewer is super important. Just when you're reading through a lot of applications, getting to the point is great. Brevity is key. And then let's say you've done all that, you've submitted your application, you've been awarded a flag, you take it on an expedition, it's very exciting. When you come back, there are some post-expedition obligations. And one of those is returning the flag to headquarters within 60 days. That's important because we want other people to be able to carry the flag, keep it going. And then the second obligation is to submit your expedition report within 90 days. And that report will go into club archives, and it will forever be attached to the history of that flag, which is pretty special. Optional, you can submit an article to the Explorer's Journal or the Explorer's Log, and we do encourage flag carriers to do that. People want to hear what you've been up to. They want to know what amazing work you are doing out in the field. So that's it for me, for the nuts and bolts, and I will stop sharing. And I think now we're probably going to open it up to questions, but I'll throw it back to Martin.
Yeah, thanks very much, Emerald. I just wanted to let people know we have people online from really around the world. Barcelona, Vancouver, Arizona, Rhode Island, Los Angeles, San Diego, Toronto, Israel. We have Africa, South Korea, Hawaii, Greenland. So it truly reflects the nature and background of our members. And I'm glad for those of you around the world that are joining us. We've had a whole slew of questions. Some have been answered by both Susan and Emerald, so we won't dwell on those too much, but we'll start with a few. One question that I thought was very well appropriated: if a flag application is denied, is there a process for review of reasons why and a second opportunity for further review for a possible approval? I'm just going to take a quick run at this one since I deal with this probably more than the committee members. I try to act as a screen in the process so that if I see an application that I don't think is going to do well downwind, we can give you some advice to fortify and make sure that it has a better chance. We're here to help you. So we realize that this is a mentoring process as much as an application process. So though some people are very seasoned in science and research, there are others that are new to the process and may not be aware of all kind of the details and nuance in preparing a good application. We want to get you there. So whatever we can do as a committee, but those should be directed to me because as I mentioned, the committee members are here to help serve the process part, but I act as kind of the screen. So at least for those who I don't think are going to have a chance, we can give you a better opportunity to present something. And the second part of that question, if it were denied, yes, by all means, apply again. This is true in every organization, even grants like Rolex, National Science Foundation, National Geographic, they all say that the second time around, you actually have a higher probability. So we see this as a learning process, not as a definitive yes or no. There's no black box to us, by the way, too. And any black box that is there, we're going to remove. I'm going to move on to another question. Does the expedition have to be based on conducting scientific research? If not, what other discipline or investigation does the Explorers Club recognize and or accept? Someone wants to jump in on that one? Susan, you want to take a stab at that one? Or I think you addressed that a little bit in your talk.
Certainly. I think that, for some people, the term science is restrictive, but it could be an anthropological study. It could be a cultural study. It could be working with Indigenous people in a certain area, whether it's in the Arctic or perhaps anywhere through the tropics. So no, it doesn't have to be what we classically define as science, but it has to answer a question and contribute to a growing body of knowledge of the world, the planet, species, people, and so on. So I think it can be fairly broad, but it may be that that you have a very new idea, or maybe the project is coming from a group of people who are Indigenous themselves, and it's a project that's coming out of a group of people as well, and you're leading it. So yes, it can be it can be multifaceted and varied, and it doesn't have to be strictly science, engineering, or technology.
Yeah, great. I think also we would want to encourage people that are trained in other disciplines. So for example, if you're coming from either social science or the arts or the humanities, that you don't necessarily see this as an exclusive science-based operation. So that if you're coming from that standpoint, let's say you're doing artist renditions, for example, if you can team up with the scientist or the group that you're working with to give it a little bit broader perspective, we're happy to entertain those as we have in the past. I'm going to go to another question. By the way, we're getting a whole flurry of these, so we're going to have to stop at 8:30, but we're going to keep going until we run out. Is there a repository for successful applications that members can see? I'm going to give this to Emerald first, but then I'm going to make a comment about this.
Sure, yeah. At this time, there is no repository for successful applications. This information that comes to us is held as confidential. So that information is not made public at this time. Martin might have some comments about that, but that's the reality at the moment.
Yeah, I think this is an excellent question on a lot of different levels. I know when I've made applications, especially to the National Science Foundation in a certain division, it's always helpful to find an example of what a good application is, so you can at least, merit your efforts against someone who was successful. And I think we might pursue that since I'm a newly elected chairman for this committee. This might be a good area to explore in terms of even the application to say, are you willing to have your application shared so that other members could see and learn from this? Because I think a lot of people would be very, positively influenced by such a comment, and certainly would want to help and mentor other people coming along. That's certainly been a recurring issue for everyone that's spoken tonight. But I think this is a very good point, and a learning one for us to maybe do a better job at showing what the bar is. So thank you for that question. We have another one. What are the deadlines for applying? We've gone over that. How much lead time? And you've done that actually. So we're not going to go to that one. We're going to go to another one.
Here, Martin from Stephen Stewart, about what kind of team members are required as it relates to academia and research. Is there an academic or doctoral team member participation requirement? And I'll take a quick stab at this, but then of course want to open it up to the committee members. So I would say that there's not a specific requirement as far as what credentials your team members need to hold. But I would say that they need to hold the right credentials for your expedition. So it doesn't necessarily mean you need to have 3 people with PhDs or medical doctors if it doesn't apply to your expedition. But if your expedition team members have 20 years of experience in the given field, and they have a proven track record, that really says a lot. And I think that's sort of what we're looking for. Does anyone else want to chime in on that?
Mike, you might have some insights on this. Mike has been a longstanding committee member, so you've seen a lot of different applications through the evolution of the process. Wondering if you have any comments about this.
Well, I think Emerald's comment was appropriate. You don't have to have a PhD on your trip, but you have to have somebody that has experience in that field. And this could be personal experience, but you need to explain that so we understand that the people going, that your goal that you're trying to accomplish, we have appropriate people on that trip to try to accomplish that. That's the only thing. We're pretty flexible, honestly, with members of an expedition. So this isn't like a drop dead thing. And back to a discussion about applications that are turned down. Well, it's always been my experience that you can resubmit that with rewording or reworking what the information is that you send us. So, don't give up the ship because of a momentary or a temporary obstacle. And I think, just the people you put on your trip are the ones you want that are really contributing, not your son's girlfriend that doesn't know anything. I'm just using it as a very bad example, but you know what I mean? Somebody without any potential contribution to the thing, that's not going to win a lot of favors from us.
Yeah, we've had the same query regarding what merits a successful application with regard to the flag report. Evan, I'm just wondering if you might want to chime in here. How did you decide what kind of flag report you were going to submit, and did you have anything to base it on when you did it?
Well, I am in the middle of finishing my flag report, so so that's and I'm probably on the bad side because I'm late with it. So I can tell everybody what the penalties will be after I turn that in.
You're good. You're good. Don't worry.
But no, I mean, in terms of doing the flag report, I've been reading the journal. I've been reading flag reports for many years, and to me, it's going back to my expedition plan and making sure I talk about all the different aspects of the things that we were trying to hit. Where were we successful? Where weren't we successful? And just in relation to some of the other questions, our core team, the core diving team, we don't have any PhDs in there per se, not related to the exploration part, but the ancillary scientific research, we do have some PhDs involved. The microbial studies, the decompression studies. So having a well fleshed out team like that, I think is pretty important. And also we've got multiple people submitting on that sort of flag report. So I've been trying to, I'm probably the worst cat, but there is a bit of herding cats on that to try to get everybody to have all that information in so we can submit something that's pretty complete.
Well, one thing I would just like to add, you brought something up, Evan, that I think is important for those out there who are trying to find a template to follow for a flag application. Look at the flag reports. You know, they document everything that was done on those expeditions.
Sure.
And I think they'll give you a really good idea of what you're looking for an application.
Yep, no, absolutely. I also wanted to encourage people who have failed expeditions to think of their flag report really as a mark of learning and not necessarily defeat. We just had a report come in from an expedition in Alaska where they went through all these efforts, had 5 dog sled teams go into a very remote village, and they were met with all kinds of issues and problems that proved the expedition not to be successful. Myself, I had one in the high Arctic. We were in just a nightmare situation. There was a hunter that was killed when we were there. He was murdered by his girlfriend. It was the most bizarre incident. And these are in a small community. This was 200 people. We go out and then there's polar bears after us the whole time we're out on expedition. And to top it off, we had an Arctic hurricane to finish off our last 3 days. And Arctic hurricanes are real hurricanes. They're not like the pretend nor'easters. I always laugh at people when they say that term. And what you realize in the Arctic, as I'm sure these people realized in Alaska too, no one's coming out to rescue you. You know, you're it kind of. But realizing that that's a learning experience. Failure is how we are marked. It's how we are resilient. It's how we exhibit our passion, our persistence, our tenacity to see something through. I mean, even if we look at, you know, this discovery of Shackleton's endurance, they failed round 1, you know. They went back stronger, better, and they got it done. So failure marks creativity, and it marks the person. So I think it's a wonderful thing. We have another question. I'm going to go to, can a commercial expedition ever be approved for a flag under certain conditions when approved directly by the board of directors? I'm going to throw that one up.
Well, that sounds to me like you're trying to circumvent the Flag and Honors Committee. If you say you take this right to the board of directors and it's approved by the board of directors over anything the Flag and Honors Committee does.
Well, I think we would still have, the ultimate say. I mean, we could still say.
I hope so. That hasn't happened in previous years sometimes though, Martin, with previous administrations. So I'm just saying that's an absolute slap in the face.
Yeah.
We turned down an expedition. There's a reason for it. And it's just stated very clearly to the expedition leader. So, you know, we can't do it. We'd love to give you a break here, but you didn't do this, you didn't do that. You know, we let them know. It's not like it's in a a papal council somewhere where there's smoke coming out of the tent afterwards to tell you whether it's approved or not. This is reviewed very seriously.
Yeah, and I would just like to add something, if I might, of just a tiny bit of clarification. So in the criteria, it says you may not carry the flag if your expedition is solely commercial. So if you do have some commercial affiliations, disclose those. It doesn't necessarily mean that you'll be turned down for the flag.
Right, absolutely. Thanks, Emerald.
Yeah, one follow-up question to that. Also curious about conservation expeditions, how they're viewed by the committee. Are these expeditions viewed differently from exploratory expeditions in terms of requirements, deliverables, and expectations? Also an interesting question, but I think this again probably has to be tied to science. Conservation has taken on some new definitions too, not only in terms of traditional conservation, but even conservation genetics. If you're going to bring an animal back that's extinct, if you're going into an area and monitoring certain things on an innovative plane or pathway that hasn't been done before, perhaps that's one. But can anyone else think of places where this might stall or it might be difficult?
Well, I think to me, it depends on what is the conservation that's being done. What's the quality? We've seen applications where they're going to test the water quality, because the guy wants to go on a nice trip, And he says, well, we're going to throw some science in there. We're going to test the water quality at each of these places. Well, that's bogus to me. That's not real science.
Sure.
You know, that's not conservation science. But I think I very absolutely like good conservation projects that are brought to us. You know, but don't bring that stuff to us.
Yep. So I think we're going to end it here. Our program was normally due for 8:30. There's still a slew of questions. We're happy to answer those back on chat. I wanted to end by saying one, as long as everybody is giving their quote for the day, I'm going to state mine from a Chinese saying, which I think is very apropos for explorers. And it basically goes, those that say it cannot be done should not disturb the person doing it. So I want to thank our community and all of you speakers for generously giving your time and energy, and of course, passion that all links us. So cheers to all of you around the world who have joined us. Thank you very much. And we're going to close our program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you
everyone.
very